Hello and welcome back to the Chaps Guide. I'm Ash, the curator of this channel, which aims to provide you with life skills, tips and advice to help you on your journey to being the best chap that you can be. Now today I want to talk to you about something which I'm very passionate about, which brings me great joy, and that's watches. Watches, that thing which unites all men in our love of something which is almost jewellery, but is very practical. Now, we're fascinated as a race with time. We only have a set amount of it on this planet, and the measurement of it becomes something of a fascination for all sorts of people. So wearing watches has been something which men have enjoyed doing for many years. But only in the last 200 years have watches been as they are today, wearable on the wrist and something which is fashionable and anybody can indulge in, from the most inexpensive item to the most expensive. So today I'm going to take you through my evolution as a watch wearer, from the very first watch which I was ever given to the watch which I wear today, and a few of the ones in between as well. So it shows what I like, my tastes, and perhaps also over my nearly 50 years now on this planet, the way that watch tastes have changed for everyone. How we've gone through phases like digital and now come back to the mechanical. So I hope you'll enjoy this little gallop through my watch collection and my evolution really of wearing watches, and I'll see you at the end to talk about what I might like next. So here we are. This is my first ever watch. This little chap is a little Ingersoll, and this was a gift from my mother. One day she sat down with me and said, "Ash, if you learn to tell the time, there will be a prize, and it'll be a watch." So one weekend I sat down with Mum, and together I learned how to read the time, and this was the reward. This little Ingersoll is a mechanical watch, quite small, just right. I was 6 years of age, 1976. And this was the watch, this was my pride and joy that I wore for many years. And Ingersoll, of course, a brand which largely has fallen out of fashion these days. They still make watches. It's an American brand, although in this one, at the 6 o'clock mark, it actually says Swiss made. So yeah, my first ever watch at the age of 6 was a Swiss-made mechanical watch by Ingersoll, and yeah, what a great watch that was, something I loved dearly. I moved on from that one to this fella, this little, very simple again, Seconda, and this is a lovely watch actually. As you can see, it's slightly rectangular in size, a little bit of gold plating on it, simple, stainless steel though, nothing fancy here. Very practical piece and mechanical. I wore this watch for a number of years, probably had it when I was about 10, and I've definitely got photographs of me as a 15 year old wearing this watch. And yeah, I loved it. It was very practical. You could wear it with pretty much anything. I would have worn it to, school, and then as I aged to job interviews and things like that. It's still running. A couple of years ago I found it in the back of a drawer and fired it up, wound him up, and sure enough it ticked on, and it does still work, believe it or not. As you can see, hang on, let's just have a little demo here, a few little turns of the crown, and hopefully we'll see the set. There she goes. So still working after all this time. This watch is a good 40 years old, by Seconda, a good British brand, created in 1966, and they are the first watch manufacturer which in 1978 sold 1 million watches in a year. I think actually they were the second watch company to do that, but yeah, still great little piece, and one which I love, and I can still enjoy it today, which is the beauty of it. So then at the age of 17, a gift from my parents again, this little chap, this Seiko, very much what you would call a dress watch, I guess, very slim little piece, and it's had many different straps over the years. I believe it came on a black sort of crocodile strap, and yeah, very simple piece, simply tells the time, not even a second hand on this, but it's quartz, so entirely accurate, and it's still in one piece. I wore this for many years throughout my adult life. It doesn't work anymore though, sadly. I did have take it down and had a new battery put in it recently, and unfortunately it did not spark up, so I dare say the mechanism is a bit shot. But then again, it is, in 30 odd years of age, so it's had a good life. and it was a great watch for me in its time. Now, at the age of 17, I enlisted in the British military, and as a result, I kind of went towards more, utilitarian watches, and this sort of field-type watch would be typical of the watches that I wore for the 10 years which I served in the military. Very practical, very, again, it's a quartz, but it's water resistant, and it's easy to read. It glows at night. It's a day-date function, so you always know where you are, what time it is. Quite a sturdy piece, it's fair to say. And I remember owning quite a few of these over the years, and as the sort of battery went, I would discard them and buy another one, because they only cost about 20 quid, so nobody loses any sleep over a watch like this. This one's not running, the battery's gone a long time ago, but it's in the back of the drawer there for the day that I need it again at some point. Now, for a large part of my adult life, I didn't really wear many watches. I think it coincides with the era of everybody sort of, relying on their mobile phone to keep the time for them. And a good friend of mine gave me this piece a few years ago. It's a Timex, nothing fancy. That's a simple Timex. It's a quartz, it's not mechanical, but it looks quite vintage. I don't dare say it's not actually vintage. I think it's got a couple of decades on it, but it's not, in the true vintage sense, way back in the 50s, 60s, something like that. But it's a lovely piece, and looks great with a suit in a sort of more formal environment. Again, rectangular in shape, which is ideal for me. I do like a rectangular watch. I think it brings a certain gravitas to a piece. Reminds me of the sort of Cartier tank type watches. But I love this one, and believe it or not, of all the watches I'll show you today, this one has had more compliments when I've worn it. And it's just Timex. Timex, of course, these days sort of fallen. They still make quite decent watches, but they were founded, of course, in the 1850s. American company, again, like in Ingersoll. Still manufacturing, still doing good work. Now, as time has progressed, practicality sometimes comes to the front, doesn't it? And this little chap here, this is, of course, the ubiquitous Casio. It's a W800H model, if I recall. And I'm just trying to catch the light on it half decently. It is an extremely practical watch, of course. It's on a resin strap. Big, long resin strap, in fact. I think it could easily accommodate somebody with an 8.5-inch wrist. And it does everything. It tells you the day, the date, seconds. It's got a stopwatch, an alarm. It's got a dual time function, so it can tell you the time in another time zone. It's water resistant to 100 meters. You push a button and it glows at night. It's got everything which you need on a piece. But it's just, unfortunately, some people are a bit snobby and they don't particularly like the old Casio brand, but for me, this fella, incredibly practical and serves me very well in the day-to-day, life, the wilds of life. So, getting on now, worn a lot of sort of inexpensive watches, and time ticked by, and I felt it was time for me to perhaps invest in a piece which could stand the test of time, something I could wear for many years. I have a son, so something I thought I could pass on to my son in due course. And a couple of brands obviously spring to mind. Perhaps two obvious ones, an Omega perhaps, and the Rolex. And for me, as a lad growing up in the 80s and 90s, Rolex was synonymous with quality and with heritage in a way. Particularly with its very attractive history, being founded in Britain, of course, in the early 1900s, and then going on to, practically storm the world of luxury wristwatches to hold the position it does today. And for me, I wanted for my first luxury watch to be something which is ubiquitous to the Rolex name. And the Datejust was the thing for me which ticked that box. The Datejust, of course, been around since 1945, so 74 years now in continuous production. And I dare say if you looked at a Datejust from 1945, it wouldn't look too dissimilar to this. This particular model I went for, well, it's a stainless steel construction. I fancied stainless steel. It's the sort of material of choice in watches today, for its practicality, its toughness, its robustness, the fact that it can be worn formally and informally. This particular watch went for the blue dial because I like blue. Blue is my favourite colour. I tend to wear blue more than any other colour, and I thought this would complement the other clothes that I have. I went for the fluted bezel, those facets you see around the face, which are white gold, in fact, on this model, I think on all models. So it just gives it that very Rolexy look. The Jubilee bracelet was the choice I went for as well, with the concealed crown clasp. You can just about see the crown there of the concealed crown clasp, because I like that continuous bracelet. It gives the watch the look of almost being jewellery, I think, and it sort of adds to its appeal to me. One of the things I liked about it, its robustness. You know, it is water resistant to 100 metres. It's got a screw down crown, so it can take a dunking in the pool or whatever situation you want to put it through. The very obvious Rolex Cyclops as well over the date window tells you that this is a Rolex. The magnifier, which I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest. It does collect some sort of, dust and detritus around the edges of that magnifier, which you do need to clean quite regularly. But I do love this watch, more for anything because of its versatility. It's a watch which you can wear with a suit, and which you can also wear casually because of its stainless steel construction. I think the ones with more gold in the two tones have a bit more formality to them. And of course it's a 36mm face, this one, the classic size, because I've got a relatively small wrist. I've got a 6.5-inch wrist, and this size watch looks absolutely perfect on me, and I do love this watch. It's one which I take great joy in wearing a few times a week when I wear the right sort of clothes to go with it. And finally, the last watch which I purchased, having got into the sort of Rolex thing, I took a fancy to their sort of professional range for all sorts of reasons. I like the robustness of these watches. And this is, of course, the Submariner, the classic Submariner, the no-date version, as it's called. As you can see, there is no date function on the dial. This watch was introduced in this sort of format, really, in the mid-1950s by Rolex. And, of course, it was intended to be a professional diver's watch in its first iteration. But over time, they've become more of a desk diver, as they call them, watches which are now worn probably never in the water. But that's the element that this piece was actually designed for. And of course it's water resistant to 300 meters or 1,000 feet. So I'll never run out of depth on this piece, that's for sure. I never do anything more than a bit of snorkeling at the seaside, so no worries on that front. But I do like this piece because it's less formal than the Datejust. It is quite casual. You can wear it in more casual environments, but again, it can be dressed up. James Bond famously wore this watch in the movies. Of course, the first few James Bonds, right up to I think Timothy Dalton, wore the Submariner. And the literary version of Bond also wore the Submariner. In fact, famously in Her Majesty's Secret Service, the book by Fleming, Bond sort of took his Submariner and wrapped it around his knuckles and used it as a knuckle duster, which is something which I sincerely hope I never have to do with this piece. But, it's good to know that it's an option when the time comes. But I do love this piece. Very simple, stainless steel construction, black face, just tells the time, very easy to read. Even after wearing the Datejust, you find that the Sub is much easier to read in all sorts of light conditions. And the beauty of this piece is it has a fantastic clasp, the glide lock clasp I believe it's called, which allows the watch to be altered in size very simply just by opening the clasp and clicking the sort of movement, the different sizes in there, which allows you to, keep it comfortable, particularly in hot environments where your wrist tends to swell a bit. So this watch has got you covered. So there we go. That is the last acquisition I had, and I'm very pleased with it, actually. Very pleased with the little collection. So that's a look at what I'm wearing at the moment. So, what did you think? That's my collection of watches, what they are. I mean, I only really wear 2 or 3 of them these days, but I've hung on to some of those watches which mean a great deal to me, and every so often I look at them and they bring back fantastic memories of where I was, what I was doing, and the special occasions that I marked with the buying of those wristwatches. So where does it go from there? Well, to be honest, I mean, I'd like to say I've bought all the watches I'm going to. Those 2 Rolexes should really cover me for pretty much anything I need to do in the years ahead. But if I suddenly came into a sum of money, say, I would certainly be interested in, let's think, The Tudor Black Bay 36 I'm very fond of, in the steel and gold variety. I've got no gold at all in my watch collection at the moment, really, and I think a little splash of gold would add some colour for the odd occasion. And the ultimate grail watch, just like everybody else, I guess, I'm very fond of the Rolex Daytona. Wasn't really so until quite recently. I was recently invited to a jewellery store's evening where they were displaying lots of their collection, the Rolex collection, and I saw a Daytona close up. And I previously used to think they were very fussy, too much going on the dial for me. But when I saw one, and I saw the size and how well they sort of go with anybody's wrist, I was very much taken. So yeah, win the lottery and it'll be a Daytona, even though I'll still have to wait probably 6 or 7 years, which was what I was quoted at the jewellery event the other night. 7-year waiting list. So yeah, long time to wait for that. But there we are. You've got to have something to look forward to, something to wish for though, and that's mine. So I hope you've enjoyed this collection. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me today and seeing what we've done. If you do, please like and subscribe to our channel, and also click that notification bell so that you won't miss any future content that we put out there. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon.